Today we'll be discussing some of this week's top news stories from the most recent issue of Inquirer and from the website as well. As we'll be looking at later in the show, the Queen came to Canterbury about a week ago. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it onto our panel today, but we do have three of the fantastic editors of Inquirer joining us. I'm Dave Lucosa and welcome to Inquirer Insight. The £12 million railway investment programme in Canterbury, the Rosetta mission here at UKC, and £43,000 for Dame Julia Goodfellow are all the stories we'll be discussing today. On my panel this evening we have Natalie Tipping, Editor-in-Chief of Inquirer, Emma Shelton, Newspaper Editor for Inquirer, and finally Ruby Lyle, Newspaper News Editor. I'd like to start with you first, Rubes, if I could, if you don't mind me calling you Ruby first of all. The £12 million railway investment programme that's on the website, if I could perhaps ask some of you to give me a bit of background of what the story is.
Well, you're useless with me because I haven't read it yet.
Basically,
Fantastic.
it's basically it's been announced that £12 million is going to be invested into making the duration of the journey from Ramsgate to London shorter for commuters. There's £12 million is being invested, and it's going to cut the journey time from I think 56 minutes at the moment to 49 minutes in future. So it's cutting 7 minutes off commuters' journeys, but it's costing £12 million. We obviously thought this was a big deal because students often commute from Canterbury to London. I know I have in the past for work experience and going home for weekends and stuff. But also, more and more people are choosing to live out in Kent and surrounding areas of London rather than in the city itself. So, commuter journeys are obviously a big deal.
Do you think £12 million is a worthwhile investment to cut 7 minutes off of journey time?
I think it sounds like a lot of money. Obviously, there's been, as you can tell from my voice, I'm Northern. There's been a bit of a, hoo-ha at the moment with HS2 as well. That's going to sort of go near where I live, and I know that a lot of people near where I live are sort of annoyed about the amount of money that's being spent on that. So I'm sure people down here would be a bit outraged to find that £12 million of taxpayers' money really is being put into 7 minutes. Are people really that impatient these days? I don't know.
Perhaps I'm going to come over to you now, Emma. The project is hopefully going to be completed by about 2019, so there's a considerable amount of wait for a £12 million investment for 7 million, which unfortunately I think most of us won't actually be here to see the difference. So do you think it's the right thing to do?
Yeah, it sounds like it's a lot of money, as Nat said, to go into just getting rid of only 7 minutes. Yeah, we're not going to be able to appreciate it. Hopefully it will be a worthwhile investment in the long run, but it sounds like a long time to wait.
Long time to wait to come to you now, Ruby, as well. Now you've heard some of the things that we'll be discussing. What's your thought on it?
7 minutes is only really that important to you when you're running that late. Otherwise, 7 minutes is 7 minutes. You'd happily queue that long for a coffee. Happily-ish. Depends on how good Starbucks are being. But
what would you rather see the money invested in? If you could have, if you was in government and you could invest £12 million into anything that you desired, what would you do it in?
Well, if they'd like to invest it into me, I'd be quite happy with that. My bank account is suffering. That'd be quite handy personally, but instead they want to put it on 7 minutes, so that's up to them.
So round up of your thoughts on this £12 million worthwhile investment?
No.
Resounding no from our panel there on our first topic.
Unison.
If you want to find out more about that, please go onto the website inquirelive.co.uk and you can check out the full bit of information on the story there. And if it's all right, what I'd like to do now is go on to our next sort of key story here, and this is Blast Off from Space. And this is an interview with one of the lecturers here at Kent in the latest issue of Inquirer about the Rosetta mission. Who would like to come in on this one?
Go on, Em.
Emma, can you tell me a bit more about the story?
Yeah, it's a really great story. If people haven't read it, they definitely should. One of our lecturers here, Dr. Stephen Lowry, is involved in the Rosetta mission, and the University of Kent are one of the only universities to be involved in this mission, and seeing as a spacecraft landing on a comet is a unique moment in history. That's quite a cool thing to be part of. And just the questions are really relatable and the answers are really easy to understand for people who don't have a kind of science background, and yet are really interesting. And just the idea that this comet could reveal information about why there's water on Earth, little things like that is really cool. So a really great opportunity that we had to interview this guy. Looking forward to see what Kent can do.
Our newspaper features editor, Katiana, is a physics student here, and he's one of her lecturers. Dr. Lowry is one of her lecturers. And she's been wanting to do this interview for so long. And then, this is the last issue that we'll be doing as a committee, and she finally managed to get, 5 minutes of his time to do it, and she was really excited about it. So, and it's turned out so well. It's a really interesting piece. As Emma says, it's completely understandable even for someone without a science background. So.
It really is. I found it such a fascinating article. And some of the detail that Dr. Lowry goes into is just so incredible. I mean, what do you think this sort of means for the future of space exploration and perhaps universities being involved in these kind of projects? What does it mean for the future?
It's so interesting for students, for students who are interested in this kind of thing anyway, to be able to say one of my lecturers was involved with this, and as Emma says, it's a unique event. Surely it's an inspiring thing for future generations and for students here at Kent, but also physics students around the country, to want to get involved with things like this and want to put their university on the map in such a huge way. It's definitely a really cool story.
Now, Ruby, you study politics and international relations. When you read this article, did it make you want to study physics?
Generally, with this sort of thing, I'm not particularly interested or engaged, but because it was a Kent lecturer who was involved, and because it was relatable suddenly to me, was absolutely fascinated, and I had a bit of a look and see all about the Rosetta mission, and I thought it was really quite fascinating.
Now, right at the end of the article, Stephen talks about one of the questions he'd like to see answered in his lifetime was the question of life existing elsewhere in our solar system, or should I say beyond as well. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I loved that last bit. I mean, I just think he seems like a really human person, relatable, and he's just got these kind of, I'd love to find about this and that, and don't we all want to know if there's life elsewhere? And actually that this comet, which seems so insignificant, it's 67 out of say 300, he says, but could shed light on that kind of thing. It's just really cool.
Final thoughts in that case then? Life existing elsewhere in our solar system, in our universe.
Yay or nay?
Yay or nay?
I'd like to hope so.
Yeah, I'd like to think there was something. It seems strange that Earth's just a total anomaly.
Yeah.
Anomaly? Anemone. Anomaly. And we can't be the only beings in the whole universe.
I'm holding out for the X-Files.
Yeah, I'm holding out for Doctor Who.
Good call.
Anyway, moving on from that. So have a quick look at the front page here. I think it's something that I wanted to mention to you before we go on to the last article I'd like to discuss, which is the education by corporation article. The front page was the Queen coming to Canterbury to unveil some sculptures, I believe, at the cathedral in town. Like I said, unfortunately she couldn't be here with us this week. We have our own royalty here with us. Did you manage to get to see the Queen?
No, unfortunately. I was actually at an event in town that day, and I walked past and there were loads of people. I was like, oh my goodness, the Queen might be in town. She might be just here. But then, I was too tired, walked home.
Sorry, Queen.
Oh, the life of a student.
I was up on campus. I had a 9 a.m. So I was just sitting, trying to get over that. We were debating, me and Ruby were debating going down into town and trying to meet her Madge. But,
I have no excuse, that's all the rain.
yeah. Well, that's kind of what it was. Like, I came up here to the media centre after my seminar, and I was like, okay, if the rain dies off by midday, I'll go down. And then by 1, it had died off, and I just thought, I don't know whether I've missed it now, and
I really wanted a whole load
Just
of
the curse
inquired
of the lazy
people
student.
to paparazzi it.
But you got some really nice photos of the Queen now. I think particularly her colour dresses she's wearing here.
Coordinates fabulously.
The choir colours really well, actually.
Yeah,
And that
Lucy
is actually-
took us such a good photo as well. Like the main photo on the front page is by a student photographer.
Yeah.
Our writer as well, actually.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, the writer who wrote the article took that photo. So, yeah, it's just really nice that we can send photographers along to things like this, and they can get sort of the inside scoop.
Let's think about the front page from last week. Now, this is leading on quite nicely to the last sort of article to discuss here. So last week, Inquirer ran with the front page headline that the Vice Chancellor of the University, Dame Julia Goodfellow, received a £43,000 pay increase, up from £222,000 to
65,000.
Thank you for the maths there. I study film. You see, it's not my strong point. But the article in question we're talking about is Education by Corporation. This was a lecturer giving his views. So I'd like to talk about this particular story in question. So tell me about the article written by the lecturer in the newspaper.
This was really exciting for us when we got sent this through, because lecturers are reading the paper. It's a student newspaper and lecturers are reading it. Yeah, basically, it's a lecturer giving their view on, as you say, the massive pay rise of our Vice-Chancellor. It's a really interesting article because they basically argue that the lecturers, as KTB News reported last year, the lecturers were fighting for a 2% pay rise and weren't given it. And basically, Dame Julia Goodfellow has been given a 16% pay rise, which sort of puts into question why the lecturers weren't given it. If if the university can afford to pay her that much more, then why can't they afford to pay their staff a little bit more? Especially when their staff are the ones that are interacting with the students who are paying, such extortionate fees day by day. Whereas I've never met the Vice-Chancellor, never seen her around. I know you have, Dave. But yeah, I think lecturers basically feel, and I would be tempted to agree with them, that they're the ones more deserving of a pay rise.
One of the things that the spokesperson Martin Herrera has said, he defends it by saying the only way it was justified as the only way to attract and retain the very best leaders in what is a global market for leadership talent. Do you think that's a justifiable response to the increase in pay?
It's quite dubious if they have to. The only way they can do it is by paying her such a huge amount of money. I think he does argue as well that, or the lecturer in question, we don't know who it is, does argue that if she's getting such a huge amount of money, she should be insulted as well. If that her only worth is in value, is valued through money. So yeah, I think definitely.
One of the things that the lecturer talked about in his article I quite found interesting was the fact that he had said that as a non-substantive member of staff, he's paid on an hourly basis, or he or she. I should clarify that because we don't know whether it's a he or she. But that does mean that there's a lot of excessive workload that doesn't get paid for, particularly under the terms and conditions of employment they have. Is that fair? Do you think it's a fair sort of system that the university operate in that way?
No. I think lecturers, and I mean, not just lecturers, anybody should get paid for the work that they do, regardless of whether it's 9 to 5 or otherwise. Yeah, I don't really agree with it. I think one of the main criticisms that's come out of the news piece, that's obviously gone around other local news outlets in the area, is that I can't remember whether it's that she's either getting paid more than the Prime Minister or she's had a bigger pay increase than the Prime Minister.
About £100,000 more than the Prime Minister.
Well, okay, so if you have to pay her so much to get her to just stay as the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Kent, then the leader of our country, in theory, sorry to the Queen, but the leader of our country, in theory, is getting paid less than the leader, vice leader of this university. It doesn't really make sense to me.
Right, I should like to pick up on this point and come over to Ruby. You're sitting in the corner quite quietly here. I think one of the things that this article sort of highlights is how universities are being run like corporations now, instead of an education establishment. Do you agree with what the lecturer is saying in that particular aspect?
I can definitely see his point. I wouldn't say that overall so much that universities being run as corporations, but when you do see the hikes in tuition fees, and out of this all you can see is a growing student debt and then a growing pay rate for your Vice-Chancellor, it's £43,000 increase. If you're being paid for her leadership skills, I want to know what's changed so much in the past 2 years which has prompted this, apart from marking boycotts and strikes. I don't understand how this is justifiable, and I'd like to have this explained more thoroughly to me than simply best option in the market.
And I think a lot of students would actually like to see that.
Yeah.
The Vice-Chancellor coming forward and actually giving her reasons for it. So perhaps that's something that we can do here at Inquire on KTV.
What was really interesting for me as well was yesterday I had the opportunity to meet a man called Robin Pittman, who was the man who 50 years ago was involved with creating what is now Inquire, what was then called Incant.
Wow.
And I gave him a copy of this paper because it was literally hot off the delivery van yesterday. And I gave him a copy, and he flicked through it, and he immediately landed on the article, and he was just like, I agree with this, just from the headline. He was like, when we started 50 years ago as the University of Kent with the first 500 students, it was very much built from the ground up by the students, rather than by the university down. And then he said, walking around campus today, we've got a new law centre being built on Elliot Hill, which is ruining the view. We've got, the Kent Wheel has destroyed the hill. We've got the new business centre or whatever it is over in Parkwood, and they've chopped down a load of trees, and it's just like the university do whatever they want to do, and not they don't think about the students or the actual sort of niceness, I suppose, of being here and being on campus. And obviously, that view of the cathedral is an amazing view, and I think a lot of students are concerned with the amount of building work going on the hill. In terms of it destroying like a central focal point of our campus. I think the article is really interesting in terms of the pay of the Vice-Chancellor, but also in terms of asking the question of, does the university as a whole actually care about the students? To which a lot of students would say, no, probably not.
Well, if we can sort of come to a conclusion with that particular aspect and say £43,000 could have paid for, and in particular it says in the article, 130 extra seminars for 130 modules. Do you think, one by one, £43,000, should it have gone to the Vice-Chancellor as a pay rise?
No. I think the thing that I'd really agree with are, there's two. The first is that it could pay 2 students' wages after they've graduated from UKC and they're unemployed. And the second one is it could have built a crossing on Tyler Hill, which is a massive issue that nobody seems to be doing anything about. It's just, if they've got this money to spare, then why don't they pay it? Why don't they spend it on something else?
Emma, your thoughts?
Yeah, again, no. As a literature student, I have 6-hour contact hours. I could definitely have got more from my 9,000 tuition fees, so the money could have gone towards more seminars. I would have been up for that.
Yeah. Ruby, what would you have spent £43,000 on? Not yourself.
And if I can't choose it on myself, free Ben & Jerry's and Essentials, I don't know, it's just an absolute absurd number for a pay rise. It shouldn't be acceptable, and it'd be much better just be spent on students.
If she was being paid £10,000 and she got a £43,000 pay rise, fine, but she's being paid over £200,000 anyway. It just seems ludicrous.
There we go, great fun thoughts from my panel there. Free Ben & Jerry's for all students, and a ludicrous amount of money to be paying our Vice-Chancellor. And that's all from our show this week. If you'd like to continue the debate and have a look for these stories yourselves, make sure you do pick up the most recent copy of Inquire, which is now available on outlets across campus. And do make sure you check in to inquirelive.co.uk for all recent comment articles and much more. KTV News is out at the end of next week for a highlights reel of what's been happening this year, and we'll be back again very soon. Thank you to everyone on my panel for joining us here today at Inquire Insight. I've been Dave Kokoza. Goodbye.